Get him, Kenny.
Bro, man.
Don't do nothing. Put the gun down. Put the gun down. Hey, put the gun down, Chuck.
It counts. You got 3. You watch this one on Chuck's.
WTFs. What the hell? But I think something is...
WTH.
Double TH.
I got to catch
Go ahead, Ernie. 1, 2, 3, go. You know, and the Godfather.
I got hit bad.
What do you average in, Chuck?
A triple single. Akeem Olajuwon used to say this to me all the time.
Can he bring me some water?
No, he used to say,
If I ask you, do you want to put some 26s on that thing? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What?
You're just talking to me because I stack paper to the ceiling and write on 24-inch chrome.
How's morale, Charles?
Morale sucks. Plain and simple. You know, I just feel so bad for the people I work with, Dan. You know, these people have families, and I just really feel bad for them right now. They've screwed this thing up clearly, and we don't have zero idea what's going to happen. I don't feel good, I'm not going to lie. And it's so funny, we just won the best studio show, but these fools turned us from Inglenook and Opus into damn Boone's Farm and Ripple. It's crazy.
You're actually angry.
I am. You know, Dan, it's so interesting. I've been spending a lot of time with the crew lately. Some of these people I work with, they brought their newborns in to say hello to us. They brought them in high school when they graduated, and now they've already graduated from college. So yeah, I'm angry at people who, they're like, you know, they're part of my family, to be honest with you. So, and I feel bad for those guys. So it just sucks right now.
What do those shows all have in common?
They all won Emmys.
That's not what I'm looking for.
Charles either has appeared in it, been part of it, or done something with it.
No.
When did I go on live with Kelly and Michael?
All of those are in the Broadcasting and Cable Hall of Fame. And that honor is the highest award of its kind to be bestowed upon the pioneers, visionaries, and stars of the electronic arts.
Who was supposed to know that, Ernie?
Oh, guys, and the entire team, this is not a prank. This year, we are inducting this show into the Broadcasting and Cable Hall of Fame.
Are you serious? That's incredible. That's pretty cool. Congratulations to the crew.
So the clip you just watched was from 8 years ago, all the way back in 2016. As you can see from watching the clip, on this particular day, Inside the NBA was inducted into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame. It was only the third sports show to ever receive this honor, the other two being all-time classic staples, and that is SportsCenter and Monday Night Football. Inside the NBA is as iconic as both of these shows in its legacy and influence. And maybe this is controversial and maybe it's not, but in some ways, it might actually be even greater. Today, the internet is filled with the Athlete Podcast, and it's a really dope wave that we're currently in. It's easy to see that Inside the NBA influenced this genre. I believe that it pioneered it. Former athletes and sometimes a non-athlete host talking about sports, but also anything else. I mean, at first people came to hear their thoughts on the games, but stayed to hear them talk about whatever was on their mind. They bickered and argued like brothers at a family function, played pranks on each other, and were in constant competition. But you always knew that at the end of the day, they loved each other, and at the end, they would laugh about it all. Most of the Athlete Podcasts today are just like this show. They have a production team and multiple cameras that they don't set up themselves. They have producers and a host to keep the conversation flowing. And despite some recent way out of bounds comments, knowingly or not, this is the model they follow. The show has technically been on air since 1989, but not in the form that we know it by today. The crew we know and love wasn't fully assembled until 2011 when Shaq joined the team. The dynamic between Shaq and Barkley, which goes back to their playing days, elevated the show to a whole nother level. I think this is obvious to anybody who's ever seen the show, but I'll offer a little circumstantial proof, bro, just for the fun of it. The show existed without the full current team from 1989 to 2010. In those 21 years, the show was good, and they won a total of 5 sports Emmys. The full team was assembled in 2011, and is currently still there, at least for right now. In those much shorter 13 years, they've earned 13 Emmys, and that's not including Ernie Johnson's or Charles Barkley's individual Emmys. So 5 Emmys for the show in the first 21 years, 13 in the last 13 years. But despite all of that history and the fact that they've been in the Hall of Fame and they still playing, you know what I'm saying? Contrary to a misguided take by Gilbert Arenas, the show hasn't actually shown any signs of slowing down. And the only thing that's threatening to take the show down is a contract situation between broadcast networks. See, the NBA's rights deal with TNT, or Warner Brothers Discovery, who owns TNT, will end at the conclusion of next year's season.
But I don't feel good, I'm not gonna lie, especially when they came out yesterday and said we bought college football. Well, damn, they could have used that money to buy the NBA.
Big spenders like NBC and of course Amazon are in the mix as the NBA's new potential home. And if that happens, not every member of the team is willing to pack up and take their talents to a new network. Today I'm gonna discuss why that is and why when you look at it, it's really understandable. Also in this video, we'll discuss the history of the show and briefly profile each member as we discuss how the show evolved over the years from when it first started to right now when it could end. I'll finish with a breakdown of what's currently going on behind the scenes and why this legendary show could be on its last legs. Y'all know what time it is. Cue the Wayne.
Yeah, you'll never know quitter, 'cause I'ma go get her.
Let's take a quick break to thank today's video sponsor. Today's video partner is DraftKings. The NBA playoffs have actually been fire. Young stars rising up, finally leaving their marks on the game. Almost all the stars left standing are under the age of 30. Time to put your money on some of these young bulls. There's just a few weeks left to get in on the action. You can do that with DraftKings Pick 6. It's a brand new way to play daily fantasy sports, and it simplifies the process, making it easily accessible. All new customers who play $5 will then get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Just download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, then sign up using code FlemLo. Pick at least 2 players, and then choose if they'll have more or less of a particular stat. Like, will they score more than 30 points, have more than 8 assists, get a certain number of rebounds, you know what I'm saying? You get it. Then you can lock them in and compete against others for an opportunity at huge cash prizes. So download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and sign up with code FlemLo, only at DraftKings Pick 6. Shout out to DraftKings once again for sponsoring the video. Now leave y'all with this. The crown is yours. I recently did a video on American Gladiators, which originally aired in 1989, but it wasn't the only classic show that started that year. Inside the NBA tipped off in 89 as well. This is a guy that you probably never heard of, but he's a key component to the story of the show. Because back in 1989, this man, Fred Hickman, was the very first host of Inside the NBA. Ironically, he was also the one guy who didn't vote for one of the current hosts to become the first ever unanimous MVP in the NBA. And you know, that host, he ain't never forgot it. So 10 years after Fred Hickman debuted on this show that Shaq would one day host himself, Hickman essentially robbed Shaq of NBA history. Shaq received 120 out of 121 votes for MVP during the 2000 season. But Hickman voted for Allen Iverson, who had a great year. But if you substitute steals for blocks, which makes sense given these two guys' position, AI only beat Shaq in one statistical category, which was assists, and he beat him by 1 assist a game. This is part of the reason Shaq oftentimes comes across as a little bit bitter about his place in NBA history. He sat back and watched Curry receive an honor that actually should have been his years before. Anyway, Hickman was indeed the show's first host, and he was good. Dude was smooth, likable, and skilled. But at the time, he carried the show more like a sports analyst that you'd probably see on the nightly news, which was the same thing that Ernie Johnson did when he first got to the show, but we'll get there in a minute. First, I just want to acknowledge that Shaq and Fred Hickman did seem to make up before Fred Hickman passed. It's not really relevant to the overall video, just closure for the side story. Rest in peace to Fred. Now, back then, it was normal for shows such as this to have a variety of hosts try their hand at the show. Then eventually, they took ratings, fan response, and feel, and they decide which guy is right for the job. That guy was none other than your boy Ernie Johnson. Not only the glue for the current cast members, but a dude who's been there hosting different iterations of the show for well over 30 damn years at this point. It feels like Ernie was just born to do this job, and if you look at his pedigree, he pretty much was. Ernie Johnson Jr. is the son of a former MLB player turned sports commentator. So he had a ton of experience being around former pro athletes and sports commentators before he ever walked on set. Dude moved to Atlanta when he was 8 years old and ended up attending the University of Georgia. Ernie desperately wanted to follow in his dad's footsteps, but didn't quite have the athletic chops of his dad. During his freshman year at Georgia, he walked on to the baseball team, and according to Ernie, by his sophomore year was told to walk off. So he soon transitioned into a sportscasting job while he was still in college. Yeah, he got started early. Then dude graduated near the top of his class with a degree in journalism. He was that dude. After graduation, he continued to work for different news stations, primarily as a sports guy. But remember, his degree is flatly in journalism, so he did some work as a normal reporter as well. He did that for the first 10 years after college graduation. Then in 1989, Turner Sports came calling. But when Ernie got to Turner, Inside the NBA was already being hosted by another GOAT, your boy Craig Sager. And it's really crazy how things work out, because for a short period of time, Craig was at the studio and Ernie was actually the reporter at the games. And it's wild, bro, because at that time, who could have predicted they'd each become legends only after switching roles? Craig Sager, who was the guy with all the crazy suits at NBA games, rest in peace to Craig, by the way, but he actually would make it into the Hall of Fame the same year Ernie and the boys made it in. It's been fun doing this video because the side stories within the larger story, bro, they all dope. A year after the show started, so in 1990, Ernie Johnson became the host of Inside the NBA. Only thing was, he was hosting the show solo dolo, all by himself. Over the next 5 years, they started rotating in co-hosts, and they made a really small but important distinction. And this little distinction set the whole tone for what the show would eventually become. Look at these pictures real quick and see if you can pick it out. Don't think about it too hard, because I ain't gonna give you that much time. The distinction was they talked to each other, while every other show talked to the cameras. My personal introduction to this was the golden years on SportsCenter, with Stuart Scott, Rich Eisen, and that whole crew. But if you look at the timelines to when all this was going down, it's easy to see that this was first started on Inside. This was thanks to a producer named Tim Kiley, who actually tried to implement this at ESPN, but he wasn't allowed to, and he eventually left that job and took a brand new role over at Turner Sports. It's funny because Tim had to threaten these trained TV journalists to get them to stop looking at the camera. He wanted them to look at each other and have a conversation that the audience now wanted to be a part of. Every now and then you turn and address them and include them directly in the conversation. Tim Kiley is another guy who's absolutely essential to the ongoing success of this show, and you're actually going to see some examples of that a couple more times throughout this video. But an easy way to sum up how much he meant to the show was that he remained a producer from 1995 all the way up till 2023, when he was sent off, as only the show could, in a special edition of the classic segment called Gone Fishing. But Tim Kiley's insistence on them talking to each other and not just to the camera, which started back in '95, is the secret sauce, the underlying DNA that allowed the show to grow into the first ex-athlete podcast. Tim did what most coaches and bosses just can't seem to do. He recognized the true strengths of his primary talent. Tim understood that Ernie Johnson was a well-trained journalist, but he also understood who Ernie was as a person. A dude who was cool as hell with a dry sense of humor, who had an infectious personality that everybody loved. Tim was trying to get that on your TV screen, a freedom he never had at his previous job at ESPN. Funny enough, ESPN would follow his lead after he left and they realized his model was successful. But you know what they say, bro, sometimes you don't realize what you actually have until it's gone. Tim recognized the true talent in Ernie before even Ernie actually recognized the talent in himself. He knew that as long as Ernie was sitting there reading a teleprompter, the audience would never really get to see Ernie Johnson. So one night, Tim just turned off the teleprompter, trying to get Ernie to be more of himself. Now, Ernie has again been trained to do the job one way, and Ernie was hot. I'm talking big mad, bro. He ended up having a bad show, and him and Tim got into it. They in the bathroom screaming and yelling at each other. You know, Ernie take his job hella serious, and he felt he had a bad performance because of Tim. While they was arguing, Ernie got so frustrated he picked up his coffee mug and smashed it against the wall. Then the mug shattered into hundreds of pieces, and they didn't know it at the time, but this was symbolic. They had just broke the mold, disrupted the industry, shattered expectations, and created something new. It was kind of like when you christen a new ship, when you get a champagne bottle and you break it on the boat. This is an old tradition that's supposed to bring good luck. Y'all ready for a double negative? It didn't not work. So Tim and Ernie made up the next day, and Ernie slowly kind of started to see the vision Tim was going for. Tim bought Ernie a new coffee mug to replace the one he broke, and it's dope because Ernie still got the cup to this day. So now the loose foundation for the show had been set. You talk to the co-host and not to the camera, and there's no teleprompter. You talk sports and bring your unique personality to the show. Okay, let's back it up a couple years, bro. In 1983, Kenny Smith was born in Brooklyn, New York, but he grew up in Queens. Kenny's interesting because he's a guy who's always been in super close proximity to absolute greatness. But at times, this can cause his contribution to be kind of overshadowed and overlooked. It's an interesting dynamic, bro. Let me show you what I'm talking about. In high school, Kenny was a McDonald's All-American, but the story was that he'd played for the winningest coach in New York State history, the legendary Jack Curran. Then when Kenny got to college, he started as a freshman and helped guide his team to the Sweet 16. The freshman point guard led the team in assists and was second in steals. But if you've never heard about this, it's probably because of the dude who was first in steals.
Up north, Carolina, that guard, 6'6", Michael.
Kenny was the only freshman in the lineup with all upperclassmen, 3 of which went on to be NBA players. And he was coached by a Hall of Famer, so his All-American status kind of gets overshadowed by these giants of the sport. In 1986, he played in the FIBA World Championship and was actually second on the team in scoring. Dude dropped 23 points in the championship game on his way to a gold medal. Then in 1987, he was a first-round pick, 5th overall to the Sacramento Kings. In 3 years in Sacramento, he averaged 15 points and 7 assists per game. Not great, but really good. He was a day one starter and made the all-rookie team, and actually made it to the final round of the dunk contest. After a quick pit stop in Atlanta, he landed with the Rockets, where he teamed up with Hakeem Olajuwon. He played his role and helped lead the Rockets to their best regular season record that franchise had ever had.
Hakeem Olajuwon used to say this to me all the time. Can he bring me some water? No, he used to say.
Bro, I can't stop laughing at that, and since I feel guilty, let me make sure I take the time to hold Kenny down. During the 1995 season, Kenny was the only Rocket to receive MVP votes, meaning he got the most votes on the team, so obviously, even more than the Dream. I mean, people know he played, but I really feel like he was probably a lot nicer than most people realize. As the starting point guard, he would end up winning back-to-back NBA titles with that team. He even had some historical performances in the finals, including tying a record for threes made in the finals with 7. Now, his second championship was in 1995, the same year Ernie and them stopped looking at the camera. Kenny's minutes were declining, and his 10-year career at that point was quickly coming to a close. So he started looking for a second career, which led him straight to Turner Sports alongside Ernie. Ernie and Tim love having Kenny on the show because, as they describe it, he was just so natural. So it was at that time that those two started making their bids to make Kenny a permanent part of the show. Like most athletes, man, Kenny was unsure. He was thinking about taking a backup role in the NBA instead. But an impromptu conversation with Craig Sager changed Kenny's mind and changed the course of history. When Sager looked at Kenny like, "You still trying to play? Bro, don't you know you a dog in this field? This could be your career for the next 20 years. And just like usual, Craig Sager was on point. Kenny's storytelling and his matter-of-fact nature, his New York charm and his smooth speaking voice, plus of course his experience and ability to break down the game, all was a huge hit once he got on the camera. And while he wasn't a superstar, bro, he was still a star and he had the credentials to back up what he was saying. At that particular time, he was the big dog on set, but soon as formal training would come into play, he learned to remain himself when surrounded by giants, in high school, college, and in the pros. So when a couple Hall of Famers just walk onto the set, it don't diminish Kenny's confidence even a little. So when Kenny joined the show, that really helped to bring out Ernie's personality even more. And like I said, man, the foundation had already been set. It's like the soil was fertile. Now something beautiful was starting to grow. And this is important because while Shaq and Barkley obviously have the biggest personality, Tim, Ernie, and Kenny laid the foundation and set the perfect environment for Barkley and Shaq. And it's poetic, man, the host and the point guard doing what they do best, setting up the bucket getters so they can drop 30. So to recap, the show started in 1989. Ernie started hosting in 1990. Tim changed the show style in 1995, and then Kenny joined in 1998. 2 years later, the round mound of rebound, Mr. Not a Role Model, retired from the league. And every network wanted the dude on payroll, because when you put a camera on him, he was must-see TV. As a high school junior, Charles was built more like a fullback than a power forward. This dude was 5'10", 220 pounds. He couldn't even make it on the varsity basketball team. Then he had the infamous over the summer growth spurt. I'm pretty sure you knew some cats like this back when you was in high school. When he left for the summer, you was looking at him like this. And then when he came back, you was looking at him like this. But over the summer from his junior to senior year, Barkley went from 5'10" up to 6'4". He made the basketball team for the first time as a senior, and then he averaged 19 points and 18 rebounds. Dude took his team to the state semifinals, where Auburn coach Sonny Smith saw him and said, I quote, "Man, there's this fat guy who can play like the wind." Backhanded compliment, but he gave him a scholarship. Barkley would be named SEC Player of the Year and would be drafted first round of the '84 draft. He played 16 seasons in the NBA, and in those 16 years made 11 All-Star teams. He also made 11 total All-NBA teams, and one of those years was even named League MVP. He retired as one of the 50 greatest NBA players, and was as great off the court as he was on it. So reporters went to Barkley when they needed them a quote, and he always had something that would give you a headline. Dude could be extremely controversial, but thoughtful and honest, and while some people hated it, they couldn't stop listening. So when it was finally time for dude to join the media, networks was going crazy trying to get him on their team. It almost played out like college recruiting, and Chuck had ironically already verbally committed to take his talents to NBC. But late in the process, I guess he recognized something kind of special was going on over at Turner. And I'm honestly not sure if he even realized it, but this was the only network that was gonna let him be himself. I don't think he ever gets to the legendary TV career that he's now had if it wasn't on this show. I think he still would have been good, but the structure at Inside fully allowed Charles to just be Charles.
You watch this one on Chuck's.
So in the year 2000, Charles Barkley joins Ernie and Kenny, and this is when the antics on the show really started to tick up. It worked so well because Barkley could laugh at himself. Dude has extremely thick skin and can always take a joke. So even though he's always said some wild stuff and made a bunch of people mad, more people actually grew to love him when they realized that the same way he'll crack a joke about anything, he'll laugh even harder at a joke about himself. When Barkley joined the show, man, it shot through the stratosphere. The foundation was laid, now you got the X Factor. So the show that was already more loose and relaxed than the rest of sports television was just getting looser. These dudes looked like they was having the time of their lives, and it felt so natural that this is what the audience wanted to be. It's funny because the production team, who damn near had to come to blows with Ernie in the beginning just to get him to go off script, was now struggling a bit with just how far things could go when you had Charles Barkley sitting at the desk. This dude cursed out Tim for the opposite reason Ernie did. He was mad because he didn't want no script at all. So he didn't understand why he needed to be in the production meeting. He was like, you want us to be us? Let us be us. Y'all had a production meeting and then just prepare as best you can to keep up with what we doing. And while I already said this was the first athlete podcast, now I'm about to give him credit for setting the mold in a completely different way. I think reality TV takes a lot of cues from what the production team ended up doing. So Ernie and the producers would sit in these meetings and create situations to put the cast in. Situations they knew would drum up something entertaining, but they just never knew how it would play out. It's like on a reality show, right? There's always some event that all the people who don't like each other end up having to go to. By sheer coincidence, they end up at the same table, chaos ensues, and the cameras are ready. But inside the NBA is when you use that power for good instead of using that power for evil. Just create a situation and let these dudes wing it, and 9 times out of 10, you're gonna have a great segment. I'd imagine this is how they set up the clip at the beginning. Ernie's in on it and the rest of the guys aren't. So you get their unrehearsed, natural reaction, and the production team just gotta be on their toes to capture it. Barkley was one of those few sign-ins that went from locker room interviews to full-fledged television and didn't lose no magic. Dude changed the show and really changed sports television. And even on the show that would have probably won a couple rings without him, he's still the MVP of Inside the NBA. So with that being the case, it made things tough for the final addition to the show's cast. The most dominant player in NBA history, who's accustomed to dominating in every area of his life. He was now coming to the team as the youngest cast member, the least experienced, and the least accomplished in this field of sports television. Not talking basketball career because he's the most accomplished in that field. Shaq and Barkley had history, most notably this skirmish back in 1999. Now 11 years later, the Diesel pulled up, and these two alphas would have to coexist. You probably already knew about the history between these two, but did you know about the history between these two? When Shaq was in high school, Ernie paid him a visit on the army base so he can do an interview piece. Shaq never forgot this and had love for Ernie since, and I believe it's this connection that allowed Shaq to work. So before he was endorsing literally anything, Shaquille O'Neal was actually born in New Jersey. His biological dad was a really good hooper, but he got involved with drugs and got locked up when Shaq was just a baby. So Shaq ended up being raised by his stepdad, who was actually a sergeant in the army. And despite Shaq's extreme playfulness, I think being raised by a military guy helped to balance him out. Because at the end of the day, Shaq can bump heads with strong leaders, and there might be some static at first, but they ultimately always seem to get the best out of them. And I think a lot of that comes from having a military dad. So Barkley had the late growth spurt we talked about. Not Shaq. He was 6'6" at 13 years old. By the time he was a senior in high school, man, the dude was 6'10" and lost 1 game total in his last 2 years of high school. He moved around a good bit, man, from Germany to Texas, and he won Texas Mr. Basketball his senior year in high school. That's around the time that Ernie came to visit, and a pivotal moment in both of their lives. Shaq went to LSU and he one-upped Barkley. Remember, Barkley was SEC Player of the Year. Well, Shaq did that twice and won National Player of the Year, once again asserting his dominance. He went to the NBA as the most highly touted of the group, all first-round picks within their respective draft classes. Kenny 6th overall, Barkley 5th overall, and Shaq was obviously the first pick in his draft. He made 15 All-Star teams, 14 All-NBAs, won an MVP and 4 NBA titles. Despite playing with another one of the greatest players ever, in 4 finals, Shaq won 3 finals MVPs. The only one he didn't get was actually the one he won with Wade, as he was a bit older and injuries were starting to add up. So he started to decline, and by decline I mean he averaged 20 points and 9 rebounds and had one of the highest shooting percentages of his career. Like I said, he was the most dominant player the NBA has ever seen. So now he's coming to the show and he's ready to take over. Okay, I'm here now, you know what I'm saying, bro? Forget what y'all was running, throw the ball into the post, let's just triangle it out, let the Diesel go to work, and we gonna win championships. You know, Shaq got an issue being a bus rider. He gotta be the bus driver. And don't judge the man because, bro, it was that psychology that makes him Shaq. That's just how it goes. It takes time to work through these things in different environments. But in this environment, things were set up a little different, and Shaq would have to learn how to just be a part of the team. Not the engine of the team, but still play an important role. And like I said, it took him a little while to make that adjustment. It was similar to when Shaq and Kobe had to learn to play together. 2 alpha dogs who bumped heads a lot. But when the time came, they could both drop their egos and lean on each other for the ultimate goal. Critics hated the addition of Shaq to the show, and rightfully so, dog. It was really bad at first. Shaq fought with Tim, just like everybody else on the show. I guess that's just a rite of passage. You gotta fight to get it right. But it's Big Shaq, so he didn't just break a coffee mug on the wall. Tim was looking up at Shaq, you know what I'm saying, talking crazy. And again, Shaq is used to kind of taking hard coaching. But in this situation, he needed to shift the dynamic. So he addressed that issue as only Shaq can. He picks up Tim, lifts him over his head, and he's looking at him like, okay, now let's talk. Tim's tone obviously changed, and the two men came to an understanding. Shaq placed Tim on the floor, and it was cool after that. Slowly but surely, Shaq figured out how to mesh. And once that light bulb came on, the show shined even brighter. You now had somebody who could challenge Barkley, and they throw jabs back and forth all damn day. Bro, they fight, they bicker, and laugh like drunk uncles at the cookout, and it's led to some of the show's best moments. But it's also dope the few times they end up on the same side, and now they tag team with somebody else. It's like Stone Cold and The Rock. All the additions just added to Ernie's cool factor, cause anybody who can be liked and fully respected by these three dudes, that there's a person the audience has no choice but to respect. He quarterbacks the whole thing and keeps his weapons all happy. Two big personality receivers and Kenny in the slot. And while I still feel like Barkley's the MVP, I feel that Ernie is the glue guy. And here goes Kenny once again, surrounded by giants, but he's always ready on 3rd and short when you need that first down. Then you got the two big dogs on the outside with Chuck at the X and Shaq at the Z. Either one of them can go off any day, and they bring their A game, especially in the biggest moments. But some teams are so good, only a few things can stop them. Salary caps, contracts, the business side of things. But in this case, there is no salary cap, so all the team's members are well taken care of and completely happy with their contracts. It's the company that pays them that's having contract issues. So Inside the NBA comes on TNT as it has for its whole damn 40-year run. TNT's parent company is Warner Brothers Discovery, and they're fighting NBC and Amazon for the NBA rights. TNT and them currently pays about $1.2 billion every single year for the NBA rights. But now Amazon and NBC are trying to slide in, and they're coming in and offering double. They're rumored to be offering somewhere around $2.5 billion per year, dwarfing TNT and them's payment. TNT's current deal goes through 2025, and after that, the NBA will sell to the highest bidder. At this moment, most people simply don't believe TNT or Warner Brothers Discovery has enough green to ultimately outbid Amazon and NBC, who have longer money. If they are outbid, then Inside the NBA, as we know it, will come to an end. You might ask, will it end or just be on a different channel? But let me tell you why those two things are one and the same. Like we've covered, Ernie's been with Turner, that's TNT now, okay? Warner Brothers Discovery, they changed names hella times. But Ernie's been with that company for 35 years. This is essentially his entire broadcasting career. And Ernie's already stated that whether or not TNT loses the rights to the NBA, he's staying at Turner. That is his home, and he's gonna ride it out with them no matter what happens. There's no Inside the NBA without Ernie. He's the quarterback. He's the glue guy. He makes it all work, not just for the audience, the cast themselves, bro. They all love Ernie. That's their dude. They don't want to do the show with nobody else. Now, Barkley's a free agent coming up at the perfect time. So no matter how this goes, he about to get paid. That bidding war they had back 25 years ago, yeah, they about to have another one with even bigger bags. So at the end of the day, we don't know where he's gonna land. It's a bit of a wild card in this whole situation. Now, when it comes to Shaq, one report says that he'll just leave television altogether if TNT and them do not retain the NBA rights. That's what the report says. Now look, when have you ever known Shaq to turn down a bag? So if somebody make the right offer, he'll probably pull up, but this is yet another wild card being thrown into the pile. And all three of these dudes could end up at different places. There haven't really been any leaks as to what Kenny will do, but with all the other members possibly moving in different directions, Kenny might be forced to pivot regardless of his preference. Now, since I started working on this video at the top of the week, the story has exploded over on social media. And look, over there, everybody's been reporting that it's been confirmed that TNT will lose the NBA rights. But Barkley spoke today, which is May 23rd, on the Dan Patrick Show, and he doesn't even know.
They're sending us articles like they've already lost it. It's over with. So I don't know what to believe. So it sucks for the people, for all of us.
But if this is the end of the legendary show, next year is gonna be mandatory viewing, when they break out the Photoshop just one last time and the whole cast and crew finally go fishing.